So, good morning, Twitch, YouTube, and everybody. I know it's been a while since I've actually put out a video. I wanted to take this time to just really absorb everything that's going on, to be impartial, as always. I mean, I know I seem like I have a lean in a certain direction, but what we need to do is, as Americans, we need to have level heads. Now, I know it's hard for some people. I know people want to see boogeymen and scapegoats and conspiracies behind every door. But let's take the events that have happened since Trump has been elected. Let's take everything into context. Now, the first thing is Michael Flynn. Now, I want to convey this to everybody out there that, oh, Trump didn't listen to anybody that, warned him about Flynn, warned him about Flynn's connections. You need to understand something here. Michael Flynn's security clearance was never rescinded. Even after he was fired by Barack Obama, went back into civilian life, where he then became an attaché and security agent, advisor for the Turkish government. The CIA and the FBI magically didn't see any conflict of interest with this, with him still carrying his security clearance. His security clearance was renewed by the FBI under James Comey in 2015. Now, if that was a thorough revetting, why was the money he was accepting from the Turkish government and the Russian government not a flag to have his security clearance, if not rescinded, reduced as a protective measure? Now, some might argue, well, they wanted to watch him, so he really didn't have the security clearance that he thought he had. Again, we don't know that. Again, we don't have any explanation whatsoever why somebody who was fired by a sitting president kept his military clearance as a civilian when they knew he was out working with foreign governments. Huge conflict of interest here, which leads to my next point regarding James Comey. There is a culture within our intelligence agencies that they do not invest themselves in politics. Now, we need to be realistic. We're all human beings here. There's going to be partisanship. There was glaring partisanship within the FBI and the CIA in regards to investigating Democrats. There has been for a while. It was very glaring during the Obama administration that there were a lot of people seated and hired within specifically the FBI that were very Democratic leaning. James Comey knew this. James Comey was treading a very thin line by investigating Hillary Clinton, but keeping quiet about it. Now, here's the thing. He had no business, regardless of whether he thought she was innocent, guilty, whether there's proof of her innocence or her guilt, he had no business usurping the chain of command in the intelligence agencies and going rogue on his own and interjecting the intelligence agencies into politics. Here's where Democrats are being hypocrites, and I want to be clear on this. Less than a year ago, Democrats were calling for James Comey's head for going to the press about Hillary Clinton, for exposing the fact that she had a private server, exposing the fact that she was under investigation. At the same time, Jim Comey was calling into question actions that were happening specifically with the Justice Department and their interactions with Hillary Clinton and her husband. A huge conflict of interest having the husband of somebody being investigated by intelligence agencies having a private, non-recorded meeting with the head of the director, the director of the Justice Department on an airplane. Comey was being squeezed between a rock and a hard spot. Do you say something? Don't you say something? He may have been getting resistance from his higher-ups. We don't know. And we probably never will know, because the way Washington has degraded, it's like a high school, where you have to fit in with certain cliques, and if you don't, your job is ruined. Your reputation is smeared, and your career because everything in Washington is career something. Career criminal, career politician, career something. It's all career-based there. It's all about money and potential for money and prestige. That's where Comey made a huge mistake because, yeah, he was a bit of a fucking attention grabber. But this is where, again, you have to start dealing with level heads here, because Trump may have been stupid in his timing of firing Comey, but the whole hyperbole about the idea that he fired Comey to derail an investigation, the investigation into the Russian tampering with the elections and the potential of collusion with members of Trump's campaign team and potentially sitting administration officials was ongoing. It was not being done by just James Comey. It was an intelligence agency's oversight of an investigation. It's not just one person. James Comey is not the only person in the FBI. And we're seeing this now. This case is going forward, regardless of who's in charge. What people need to understand, and this is hard to gather. Let's hypothetically say there was collusion within the advisory team of Donald Trump, which means these people set out to not necessarily inform him, because you're dealing with somebody who has no experience in political life whatsoever. People need to realize this. Most of the people that you see seated in a presidential position are groomed. They are groomed from the state level on their way up as potential candidates. They're groomed. So they know the in and outs of Washington. They have experience in the Senate, or they have experience in law, or politics, or, they have a degree of experience. Even Barack Obama, as a lawyer and a senator, had some degree of experience. He was groomed by the Democratic Party, yada, yada, yada. Trump is not a groomed politician. He's raw. He's inexperienced and highly dependent on being informed by a group of people around him who don't necessarily have any interest in keeping him informed. So, again, if this was a plot by Russia, hypothetically, I don't really think it is, but let's say there was a plot by Russia to seat him in the presidency, to seat somebody who's woefully inexperienced, and see how far they can pull him in different directions. How not informing him, keeping him misinformed, will allow him to stumble, will allow him to make mistakes that benefit them in some way. We may be seeing that now. Does that mean Trump colluded with Russia? I highly doubt it. In fact, I'll go as far as say is no. Absolutely not. And this is where the salacious attacks and all of the asinine stuff that we're seeing scrawled across CNN, oh, he's mentally unstable, the FBI knows what he's thinking, that needs to stop. What needs to happen now is all these people that are on intelligence committees and seated in Congress they're part of the investigation, they need to get their faces off of American media. Shut your fucking mouths. Go do what we're paying taxpayer dollars now for you to do. Go do your job. Work with the intelligence agencies. Let the intelligence agencies do their job. Stop smearing them across the news every fucking morning, questioning whether they can be impartial. And, let's let the chips fall where they lay. And then we will do what Americans always do. Because when we find out that an elected official is corrupt, guess what? They're gone. We did it with Nixon. We impeached Bill Clinton. If there are impeachable offenses, if there is evidence that he colluded with Russia, then we will do what our executive judiciary systems do best. It's the structure of our democracy. But to sit here and immediately label somebody as a colluder with Russia, when, from what we've seen, there is absolutely no tangible proof. There is no money laundering between the Russians and Trump. There are no secret telephone calls every night. Hey, Mr. Trump, rescind sanctions on Ukraine. We're not seeing that. And we need to be realistic too. We may never see that evidence, depending on its classified level. But we need to stop the prejudging. There are plenty of things going on right now that need attention. Predominantly things that this Republican-seated Congress want to do. Some of them are great. Cutting regulations on small business and private businesses is excellent. It's something that strangled our economy under the Obama administration. Nobody is denying that. Democrats even admit that the excessive regulation of business in America was bad. It turned the recovery into this slow crawl. Cleaning up our regulatory system and our tax code, which love or hate Republicans is something they want to do, yeah, we should all be on board with that, and that's something that we should be pushing regardless of what's going on with Donald Trump. That's one element of what's going on with his administration. There are things that need to be done in this country, irregardless of what's going on with him, what's going on with the investigation. We need to get things done in this country. We have a seated president. Let's take advantage of it. But we can't let a Republican Congress run amok. Their overturning of environmental regulations is a huge red flag. Some of the regulations are excessively draconian. They're punitive on certain industries, and yes, they need to be changed. But completely rescinded to the point where it's okay to contaminate groundwater, contaminate the air, rescind pollution restrictions that have cleaned up the American environment greatly, can't be allowed to go on. And healthcare. This needs to be said over and over and over. Under Barack Obama, they had 8 years, 4.5 to 6 of them with a fully democratically controlled Congress to get a really feasible healthcare plan for Americans passed. What they did was a compromise with the healthcare industry to basically pilfer Social Security and give gratuitous handouts to insurance companies to keep them invested in a healthcare plan that was designed to fail. It required a mandatory enrollment. It required that everybody purchase insurance, and those that didn't got fined. It basically put a tax on poor people who could not afford insurance to begin with. That's what Obamacare was. And everybody knew this was going to, at some point, fail. It was going to blow up in faces when healthcare providers who blanketly just accepted anybody regardless of their condition, their health, the costs rose and rose. And part of that is the fact that the healthcare industry's prices are out of control. There are no cost control means. It just scales beyond belief. But over the course of nearly 8 years, we had the ability to genuinely work towards a path towards a single-payer program. And I want to be clear on this. I personally don't believe healthcare is a right. Healthcare, yes, is to a degree a privilege. However, given the economic ramifications of illness, and this is the one thing where it no longer becomes a partisan issue, because it becomes an economic issue. You're jeopardizing the prosperity of Americans based on the potential of them having a life-threatening illness. And one of the things that should be a bastion of democracy, especially our definition of democracy, because we believe that our role as a democratic nation is to be a mentor to the rest of the world. However egregious and pious that is, the fundamental of that is that we treat our citizens the absolute best we can. And we are not doing that. One of the ways to do that, it's very simple, is a single-payer healthcare plan. The biggest fight against that came from, guess what? The healthcare industry and their lobbyists and their manipulation of the American political system to put forth this retarded thing called Obamacare, which did not work. So if we really want to be a bastion of democracy and really seriously take advantage of what we have right now, which is a streamlined Congress. I don't care whether it's Democratic or Republican. At this point, it shouldn't be a partisan thing anymore. We should be happy that we have a seated directional government that wants to get something accomplished. The American people need to stand up and say, look, no, we don't want the plan that you are putting forth. We want what many democratic nations have, that have it, and it works pretty much very well. Most countries that have single-payer healthcare programs work very well. There are issues. We've seen them happen in Canada. We see them happen in the UK. We need to be very clear and aware of them and be able to be fluid to adjust our own single-payer program to meet those obstacles. That's where we should be going. But instead, there's this huge distraction. And part of this distraction comes from the Democratic Party specifically is in the denial, not even the denial, they're in the rage part of loss. They're in denial and rage. They're crossing into those two parts because they do not want to admit that they failed. You guys failed. And a huge part of this, I was actually reading the transcript, and it was, oh my god, so incredibly long, of a class action lawsuit that was filed against the Democratic National Committee, where they basically admitted that they don't even have to follow their own charter, which calls for being fair and balanced in terms of how they treat potential candidates for the presidency. Let this sink into you guys for a minute, because I know I have many Democratic friends who watch my videos. The Democratic National Convention, which is the oversight for all state primaries, the presidential primaries, basically said that there could be 30 Democratic candidates for presidency. You may like candidate X, and you may donate to us thinking that when this person wins the primaries, we're going to foster that person towards a presidential election. However, we're going to tell you no. We're going to do whatever we want. We're going to take that money, and if we decide that candidate A, which nobody likes, we just, that person decided to, manipulate us and give us money and lie to us the most, we're going to foster them as candidate, whether you like it or not. That's basically, during the breadth of this class action lawsuit, what the DNC's lawyer said to a judge. In open court, admitted that the Democratic National Committee has no vested interest in listening to their own constituents. This is an enormous political party, one of only two in this country, that basically told its own electorate, go fuck yourselves. Your opinion and your future does not matter. All that matters is that you give us money and let us do whatever we want. And this is why I say what we're seeing now is a indirect correlation to the fact that we had a Democratic seated president for 8 years and put this entire culture into Washington of who gives a shit what you want, what you think is best, we're just going to do what we want. And Barack Obama clearly did that through many executive orders. His administration did this with their immigration policies, their policies towards the Middle East, their policies towards Iran, their policies towards North Korea, and their policies towards Russia. They're so distracted and in denial. The FBI and the CIA warned the DNC, told them straight out, we believe that your systems have been compromised by Russian hackers. We're offering to help you safeguard your systems. All we need is access. The DNC said no. And there's a very glaring reason as to why, because lo and behold, thanks to WikiLeaks and Crucifer 2.0, we found out the DNC conspired to fuck any other candidate over in lieu of putting Hillary Clinton on the presidential ticket. And what baffles me to no end is why Democrats are not severely disturbed by this. They don't care. And the fact that you don't care is horrifying, because at the rate we're going, in 4 years or maybe less, who knows, there's going to be another election, and thanks to what's going on, there's probably going to be another Democrat put into power. I kind of hope not, but it's probably going to happen. And that's the mentality and the mindset and the total disregard that's going to be injected right back into Washington. We don't need that. We do not need that type of toxic atmosphere interjected into our politics. Nobody's denying that the Republicans are not necessarily much better. But I have yet to see any evidence whatsoever that their primary process ever works like that. I have never seen a candidate come out of the Republican primaries that a majority of Republicans did not like. Trump skimmed by, but that was because he was brazen. He was not the typical candidate. And I'm going to say this. For everybody that keeps pushing this Trump-Russian collusion thing, with all the money that both the DNC and the RNC have, there is no fucking way in hell that he ever would have made the Republican ticket if there was ever any evidence that he colluded directly through financial ties with Russia. Because love or hate Republicans, they do their due diligence. They really freaking do. They have enough investigatory power and money behind them that if he had any whiff of being a Russian agent, and it's not hard to figure them out because there's always money trails, there's always paper trails, there's ways of finding out, he would not be there. Period. I'm not saying don't be alarmed, because, yeah, someone, probably Russian, and I'm going to say probably, hacked the DNC, attempted to manipulate an election. I don't think anybody on either side is denying this. Hell, you have Republicans seated in the intelligence agencies that are saying this, so it's coming out of both sides. Nobody's denying this. So the first thing we should be worried about is insulating our process from this. Now, that doesn't mean this crap about fake news and shit needs to go away, because the glaring bias from the American media, mostly the liberal media, but big media in general, which we all know can be manipulated financially and is controlled by finances, was skewed insanely in the direction of Hillary Clinton. And for the first time in a long time, the American public was, to use a stupid word, woke. And this is part of what's triggering the Democrats a lot, is they can no longer sell the same bullshit to the American public. As much as I deride the American public for being very ignorant of the things that go on in this country, slowly but surely, we're getting to the point where we say, no, enough of your bullshit. Stop telling me what's right for me. I know better. And in general, the American public does. And this is where I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that Trump's travel ban wasn't enough. And I know this is going to confuse a few people, so let's go over what I'm trying to relay to everybody here. The travel ban was horrendously timed, and its target was far too narrow. Because, and this is where I'm going to trigger a lot of people. Of course, it was going to get shot down, be it through rogue judicial people or probably the Supreme Court, because it was too narrow. It was too focused on 7 Middle Eastern countries, and yes, it was not worded to ever mention the Muslims. But let's not be ignorant. We know how the judiciary works. We know how screaming, crying liberals work. We knew this was never going to fly. It was never going to pass. So here's where I say it was far too narrow. It should have been all-encompassing. There should have been a 365-day moratorium on all immigration. All of it. Because there are people now seated, predominantly through the Obama administration, in the Immigration and Naturalization Services that don't give a flying fuck about American security. You only need to see the people that they have let in on asylum and on student visas and on work visas who have turned around to be terrorists. And one of the things that you're not hearing is, of the, I think it was 2,000 people that were investigated last year for ties to terrorism and extremism, 90% of them were refugees or asylum seekers living in America. So let that sink in for a second. The entire structure of the Immigration and Naturalization Services needs to be redone. Because what they're doing is artificially, through the behest of business, predominantly multi-billion-dollar corporations like Facebook, Microsoft, Intel. These companies want dirt cheap labor. Dirt cheap labor, and they want to suppress American wages. This argument that Americans don't want to clean bathrooms and don't want to pick fruit and don't want to work on farms is the biggest load of shit you'll ever hear. No, Americans don't want to be treated like slave labor. We want honest living wages. I want that for everybody, including the 11 million undocumented immigrants that have been living here for decades who are being treated like slaves. And the Democrats are perfectly fine with this. They are the party of slavery. You only need to look at the way they view immigrants today to know that. To see proof that they view everybody else that isn't white and liberal as slaves. I don't think that Ecuadorian nationals that are picking apples on a farm in California should be making below minimum wage, being exposed to pesticides, and have no remedy and no health care, and not be treated as American citizens. And this is where Republicans have gone extremely wrong on this, in this direction, in my view. If they're criminals, get them the fuck out. Kudos to Trump, kudos to ICE, kudos to our intelligence agencies for getting those type of people the fuck out of this country. But there are an incredibly large amount of hardworking, I'm going to call them undocumented Americans, because they're not illegals. They're undocumented Americans who have been paying taxes here for decades. They have families here. They have businesses. They do support our economy. What should have come out of Donald Trump, in tandem with this, I'm going to secure our borders, I'm going to evict criminals, should have been, within 30 days of the existence of my administration, clemency for every undocumented American as long as they come out of the woodwork and get documented. Come out, let us register you, let us get you documented, get you a legitimate social security number, and let's identify you as the American citizen you are. I don't understand why that's hard. I don't. I really don't. It's ignorant. It's stupid. Our system fucked up. We left the gates wide open. We're responsible for that. And then once we did that, we then turn our eyes to Latin America, which frankly, our trade deals have not benefited them the way a lot of people think. There are a lot of Latin American countries that are still dealing with authoritarian governments, still dealing with narcotic trade, still dealing with corruption, still dealing with poverty. And instead of us worrying about, trade with the Middle East and trade with, Asia, let's keep it close to home. Let's enrich the entire continent, because what happens is once you make life better for the people in Latin America, they won't want to come here. Plain and simple. If it was better for them down there, they wouldn't come here. And I'm not saying that we interject ourselves into the politics of Latin American nations. Hillary Clinton already did that. She's partially responsible for what's going on in Venezuela right now. She's partially responsible for what happened in Colombia and what happened in, was it Peru? I'm trying to remember. There was another Latin American country where the Clinton Foundation got involved in tinkering with politics and trade and stuff. She had her fingers in there too. I just don't remember which country it was. But this is my gist. We have an unprecedented opportunity here for once, where we have a president that wants to work for the betterment of the country, genuinely wants to. Whether the people that surround him want to do the best for the country is up for argument. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't try jerry-rigging and pushing and pulling to get as much as we can out of this, because as the American people need to understand, it's the only way we're going to get what we need. You need to pressure them as hard as possible. Not resist and revolt and obstruct, but malleate, shape. Make it clear that no, you will not get into power unless you listen to us. Because that's the fundamental of our system. It's been so co-opted and so corrupted for so long, and we've taken this very complacent attitude towards the future of our country that we cannot afford to sit back anymore. And thank God, a lot of people woke up to it, essentially regarding immigration and Muslim refugees. But again, this is another area where, while I commend Donald Trump on his push to try to keep refugees out of the country, we cannot deny that America's policy towards the Middle East in the last 50 years has, via proxy, via interactions and collusion with the European Union, with European nations, with Middle Eastern nations, predominantly Saudi Arabia, have created this situation. We need a fundamental change. And God bless fucking Donald Trump for saying no. I am not for regime change. I am not here to unseat Assad. And that has nothing to do, again, with Russian collusion. It's the fact that there is no reason why a single American life should be sacrificed to interfere in the political structure of another country. Shouldn't. Absolutely shouldn't. Should we be making it hard for Assad when he violates his own people? Yes, absolutely. But that's where working with Russia, who is Assad's biggest ally, makes a hell of a lot more sense than bombing the shit out of Syria, which has already been destroyed by war. If you don't believe Syria has been destroyed by war, just look at pictures of Syria 10 years ago. Look at Raqqa 10 years ago. And tell me that Syria has not been destroyed by war, straight out war. Be it a civil war, be it a war created by interference from our government and European nations, because let's be honest, there's a reason why ISIS is targeting Belgium, France, and America. Because the political policies of the last 8 years, many of them under Secretary Clinton, with funneling munitions into Syria, blindly giving them to people we thought were moderate Muslims, created this situation. Nobody's saying that Assad is a fucking angel. Nobody is. And if there is actual proof that the man has used chemical weapons against his own people, again, proof, then yeah, You arraign the son of a bitch on war crimes. You get a clearance from the United Nations to go in and arrest the son of a bitch and try him. But until that happens, we have no business interjecting ourselves into the leadership of another country, especially when just next door you have North Korea threatening nuclear war. Which one do you think is a bigger threat? So that's my 2 cents for the day, and thank you for watching.